pjnet.tv. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast. And running down our checklist, we are recording. We are streaming to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We have a chat room waiting. We have a guest waiting in our green room. We will start a countdown to Studio 13. Well, good evening and welcome to Joshua Masters. No. Welcome Joshua Masters to pjnet.tv over there. And it's going to be a great night because we have all kinds of exciting things that you will want to know about from someone who knows about them. And they'll be there tomorrow, so come back and see that. Tonight, it's been over a year, I think, since we have visited with Joshua Masters. And tonight, he is going to come on board and explain, first of all, he has a new book. And Joshua, congratulations. I have not heard much about the book, but I have heard very much about the launch of it. But tell us about, catch me up. We haven't talked in a while.
How are you, Coach?
Just, man, we're ready to roll.
Awesome.
It's time.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So my new book, A Faith Unleashed, Living in the Hope of God's Rescue, came out this week or last week, really. And that was a whirlwind. And of course, we're still working with the launch team, and it's been an incredible launch. And it's good to be back with you. I think it was March. It was March or April of 2020.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Since we last chatted, and we didn't have a great connection that time. So I'm hardwired. I'm in a new spot so that I could be hardwired instead of on Wi-Fi. So we have a better opportunity to chat more clearly.
Well, hopefully it'll hold up. You never know when the internet is at play.
No, we don't have control over it, I'm afraid.
There's no number to call when things fail.
No.
Because they did away with the Yellow Pages. I'm sure that Internet Incorporated was in there.
Internet Global, yeah. It was next to the Illuminati.
And the Club of Rome.
In the Yellow Pages.
Yeah. Remember those?
Yes, I do. They were very easy to use.
That was big business, too. That was a money machine.
Yes,
the sales reps that they would hire were the very best of the best because they had to travel, and they had to pay them well. But I wonder what they're doing today. They're probably having conversations with the people that made buggy whips for the horse and buggy.
Right, and they have a weekly support group with the folks who sold encyclopedias.
You can't go wrong, with a cute puppy, right? I mean, you don't have to really be a good writer to be successful, do you? I mean, or would it help?
It helps. It helps if they're going to read past chapter 1 to be at least proficient in writing. But certainly it does not hurt to have a cute puppy dog on the cover to get people to pick it up. That's absolutely true. So that's true. The book is about my personal rescue dog, Franklin the pup. And his story is really a backdrop for our story. So he was from a puppy mill, and he had been abused and neglected and treated badly, and he had been infested with fleas and ticks and had ear infections and eye infections, and clearly had been abused. So the book is the story of his journey from isolated brokenness to joyful belonging. And it's an allegory of our journey from isolated brokenness to joyful belonging as we are adopted and rescued by Christ. So each chapter is a true story of something that has happened to Franklin, but then there's life and biblical applications for us, and then discussion questions and study questions and action steps to take for us to have an unleashed soul and an unleashed faith.
So how long have you had Joshua? I mean, Franklin.
I've had me my whole life.
I'm reading the screen.
I've tried to get away from myself, but I've had me my whole life. Franklin is actually sitting next to me, and he is 12 years old. We got him when he was 4 months old. That's when we rescued him from the puppy mill. But we've had him for 12 years, and he's laying next to me on the couch right now.
Well, last night I had my 110-pound German Shepherd at my side, but he never barged in. Would he have stood up? He would have taken up most of the screen.
Does he think he's a lapdog?
He does, and he really likes to get close to me. And when you're trying to make precision moves with your mouse, you know,
Yes.
and the dog's licking your hand, it's really hard to do. Joshua, I had a question. Maybe you bring this out in the book, but there's a beautiful story, obviously, when the rescue theme and the biblical implications are clear. But is there any mention in there about the loving God that takes on people like us? Because you could have, I assume, picked any dog. Why did you pick this defective dog? You could have not had, you could have just got a nice dog and not had all that baggage.
Yeah, that's actually an incredible story, and it's sort of recounted in chapter 1 of the story. And chapter 1 is really about how God sees us, even when we're in our darkest place, in our most miserable place, when we feel most abandoned. God still sees us, and he is reaching out to us. So the illustration in the beginning of the book is that once Franklin was brought to a rescue shelter, he was, huddled in a kennel. And although the people at the rescue were showing him his first kindness, he still didn't have a home, and he still was huddled in this cage, not knowing that I was desperately searching for him. And that is how God is desperately searching for us. So sometimes when we feel like we're in a kennel and we don't know if anybody's coming to our rescue, we've been put in the exact place we need to be for God to come and rescue us. And the way he brought Franklin to us was just absolutely miraculous, for lack of a better term. We had been looking for a dog. Because I have allergies, I had to be hypoallergenic. And through a series of events, I'll just sort of summarize what's in the book. We were looking for a black miniature poodle, but because of some financial issues, we didn't want to spend more than $200, and we were eventually going to name him Franklin. That we had already picked out a name, and we were going to name him Franklin. And I kept picking dogs and sending them to my wife that neither of us really liked, but I was not in a great place of patience, and I thought any dog today would be better than the right dog tomorrow. But my wife, of course, was smarter than me, and she kept saying, when we find the right dog, we'll know it's the right dog. So we're praying for this miniature poodle that's black, under $200, within driving distance. And one day I log on to the rescue pages, and I see the little thumbnail, and I put down my coffee and lean in and click on it. And there he is. He's only 2 hours away, a black miniature poodle, $200 exactly adoption fee. And the shelter had named him Franklin.
You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it really does sound like you're making it up. I mean,
no, that's exactly what happened. So, of course, we knew he was meant for us. And ultimately, of course, God knew about this book, too. But that was, years earlier when I had no idea about it.
Well, you said 14 years. Is that what you said? 14 years? 12. Okay. So 12 years. I mean, this is getting toward the fourth quarter in the dog's life.
Yeah, well,
where'd you get inspiration to write a book? You had the dog a long time.
Well, it took me a long time to write the book because I'm also a full-time pastor and have lots of other activities. So it took me longer than it probably needed to. But the idea from the book came from this. One of the ministries that I oversee is Celebrate Recovery. Mm-hmm. And if your listeners and your audience is not familiar with Celebrate Recovery, a lot of people think it's about drugs and alcohol and only about drugs and alcohol. But most of the people who go to Celebrate Recovery 2/3 actually nationwide are there for issues like relationship issues or guilt or self-esteem issues, abuse issues, food issues, like whatever it is that's preventing you from getting closer to God. So it's all different types of struggles. And so when I started running that ministry at a church in Vermont, I found myself every week, because Franklin was younger then, sharing stories about his rescue and about his adoption to illustrate the rescue God wanted to do in the lives of the people at Celebrate Recovery, and the adoption and what adoption would mean to them in the family of God, and how that could be used to overcome their struggles. So every week I sort of had a story about Franklin, and it was my wife who said, that could be a book. Why don't you put all these stories about Franklin into a book about spiritual growth? And so that's where the idea for that was born.
I have a rescue story. My wife rescued a little, for lack of a better word, a Chihuahua. I don't like small dogs. Okay, my parents would not let me have a large dog as a child. So I've determined the criteria for dog size is the dog should be large enough to use as a pillow. Okay, so I don't like small dogs, but my wife rescues this little Chihuahua, whatever, a little yapper. Apparently, that dog had a very bad experience with a man, because I would not do anything to cause harm to any animal other than to kill it to eat it, but that dog would tremble on sight of me and just shake, just tremble. And it took probably 2 years before that dog began to trust me. And of course now it's like, please, you're your mama's dog. But you're telling a narrative of theology that I won't say is in contrast, but it certainly is, in contrast to a lot of the narrative that comes from pulpits and from our churches, that God is righteous and we are sinners, and we're bad and he's good and we're going to hell. And, all the bad fortune that we're encountering is because, we've been unrighteous, our transgressions. It's a wonder, and yet we wonder why people don't want to go to church. But you have
some of what you
angle.
said. Yes, some of what you said is true, of course, that we are sinners and we are unrighteous, and God is holy and God is sovereign and God is righteous. All of that is true.
And just.
And he is just. And he's fair and he's just, as you just said. But many times that's where the story stops. Christ, when he came to earth, that was a rescue mission, right? Philippians 1:6 tells us, or 6 through 8 or 12, but Philippians
Google it.
2, actually. Yeah, 2. Man, I wasn't prepared. Philippians 2, 6 through 8 tells us that Jesus was God. He is God. And he was sitting at the right hand of the Father, but he didn't think of equality with God as something to cling to. So he gave up his divine privileges and he became a human being and took the position of a slave. That was a rescue mission. He could have easily stayed at the right hand of the Father. I think that's one of my favorite passages, even though I forgot what it was for a moment. The idea that Christ was in perfection and in eternity, and he was surrounded by angels who worshiped him, and he would look around and look at the desperation that we're in and say, I will leave here and go rescue Josh Masters. I will go rescue the coach.
Knowing full well the price.
Knowing full well the price. And the adoption price was much higher than $200.
You might say. We're not worth it.
We are not worth it. We're not worth it, but that's what's so glorious about it. So when you get these fire and brimstone, and I don't think that you should, back off from the truth. You have to be truthful about what the message of the gospel is, that like we are in a wretched state. We are helpless and hopeless. But when you look at everything he gave up to bring us home and to rescue us, his defining trait is love.
I've been out for a week and things are off to a start. And Joshua, I would like to, we wanted to get the gospel message in there first and primal, but I have literally, when they found out that you were coming on the program, I've had no less than 3 specifically ask me to ask you, how did you pull off a book launch, and what advice do you have for others? Because your book launch has gotten the notice of it's the envy of everybody right now. So are you just lucky?
Well, I wasn't aware that people were envying my launch, but
yes, they are.
It has been incredible. I don't really like to use the term lucky. I think God does have a plan for the book, but in terms of our part in it, is who are you surrounding yourself with? I think you said earlier, it certainly does help that there's a cute dog on the cover. That does help. Like you can't deny that that's a part of it. But I did hire a launch coordinator now named Karen Sargent, and she's been great. She's been amazing, and she's been sort of running the launch.
Okay, well, let me ask something. Did you go to the Yellow Pages and look for book launches? I mean, how would anybody know to do that? How did you know to do that?
Well, I'd like to say it was because I was smart, but my publisher introduced me to Karen and said that she was known for doing a good job. So that was one of those introduction situations.
So does she have a business card that says Karen Sargent, book launch manager?
She is also an author, and she does this as well. So I don't know exactly what her business card says, but we worked together on what the plan was going to be and what we wanted to convey. And one of the things that I think is important is that you are engaging those people who are on your launch team and care about who they are, So it goes beyond, here's your tasks, which we have tasks, we have things that we ask them to do and certain things we ask them to share, but you want to build a community. If you're just asking 20, 50, 100 people to just do stuff for you, there's not going to be a lot of buy-in. But if you actually care about the people who are in your group and you look for opportunities to start conversations about who they are and what their struggles are, and of course the theme of the book being this coming out of our darkest moments and being rescued by God, that gives a great opportunity to have conversations. So I think people want to engage with the author if they're on a launch team. So even if you hire a coordinator, you want to make sure that you're intimately involved, and the coordinator can certainly do all the keeping track of everything and all the administrative pieces and some of the creative pieces, but you need to be engaged. You can't just hire someone to give people memes to put up and not be engaged, right? So every week I'm doing a chapter discussion with only my launch team. Nobody else is invited. Maybe I'll do one for the public in the future if people are interested, but we do a chapter discussion where I read the chapter to the team, and then we discuss it and we talk about our lives and we talk about our feelings and what our struggles are. And I've made a commitment to them that I'm not going to post any of that anywhere. They can post whatever they want, but it's a confidential, safe place. And we post discussions in our Facebook group so that we can get to know each other and that we can share things about ourselves. And then we make the challenges fun, and we do giveaways, and there'll be like a grand prize drawing at the end. But I would say the key, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert because like this has gone so brilliantly well, but it's not like I've done this 100 times. But I would say the key to a successful launch is the same thing that makes a church successful, which is community. Are you investing in one another? Are you building one another up? Or are you just trying to get people to do things?
Wow. Okay. It's not about content, it's about community. That'll preach.
I mean, you need content.
Well, the
You
content
need
has to be,
content,
yeah.
but that's not the main. That's not the main thing.
Well, but there is this notion, whether it's emotional or whether it's being taught, that content is king, and certainly the content. First of all, we are called, scripturally called, commanded to excellence. It's not
Sure.
optional. It's not optional. We are to work as unto the Lord, so that's not optional. But anyway, all right. So some
But
people.
what's your motivation? That's the question.
There you go. Where's your
Is your
heart?
motivation in excellence your own success,
Right.
or is your motivation in excellence to glorify God?
Right.
And
Right. Exactly.
in obedience. Now, see, most people know the right answer, but you have to evaluate what your actual
Right.
motives are.
Well, and I chased that dream. The Corvettes, the boats, and all that stuff, the vacations. And I won't say that I didn't enjoy them, but the shelf life of that joy was short. It's an addiction, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I still say to this day, if the world would have delivered on about half of its promises, I might still be living like that. But the fact is, they can't. I now consider monetary success, success in business enterprise, as a parenthetical and logical outcome of doing a job well. The goal is to do the job well.
Yes.
The income is a literally parenthetical side effect that logically comes out of doing anyway. All right, so I'm buying into everything you're saying, even though I'm not an author, we'll never need a launch team. But I am also imagining someone's watching this saying, well, yeah, but I ain't got that kind of money. I don't need to hire somebody. I know what a launch is. I can do this on my own. Why should I do that? Do you any regrets? What would you tell
You
them?
might not need to. You might not need to. Like, you've got to evaluate it for yourself. As I said, I'm a full-time pastor and I have multiple projects happening. And so I was introduced to this person who has done this multiple times, who is good at it. Mm-hmm. And I could still be very engaged without having to figure out when are we doing the drawing and mm-hmm. what is the time to put up this post. I could just mm-hmm. engage in the people. And I'd rather invest my time in investing in the community than keeping track of things. But you certainly could. I think someone could do their own. You've just got to decide what is the time commitment that you're willing to put into it. Because if you want to do it well and you want to do it with excellence for the kingdom, then you've got to decide where to put your time. So mm-hmm. I think absolutely someone could do it, especially if they have some sort of artistic nature. Somebody's got to make the memes and the mm-hmm. and the content that you're asking people to share.
And that is a craft. So, that is not just go hijack a picture off of Google Images and throw some text on it.
Yeah. Now that happens to be something that I actually enjoy doing, but in this case, I had seen Karen's work. She did excellent work. I knew I wasn't going to have time to do everything that was going to have to happen for that 3-week launch. It's like all encompassing. And she's just done an incredible, amazing job. But certainly you've got to decide for yourself. The key is, what are you going to do? And at whatever scale you're going to do it at, do it with excellence and seek community over outcomes.
There you go. Joshua, you surprised me with your answers, because there's a lot of sales pitches out there, that people say, I find myself saying from time to time, if you're not willing to invest in your work, why should anybody else buy it?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Investment doesn't have to be your money. It could be your time. It could be your talent. So, well put. Joshua, we've run out of time, and you can tell, you're in our green room, that Michelle has joined us in the green room, and she'll be coming up in just a few minutes. But Joshua, thank you for sharing with us tonight, and we are proud of your work and can't wait to find out more. And you've set the bar pretty high. If you ever write another book, how are you going to avoid being a letdown. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Well, thanks for having me on, Coach. I really appreciate it.
You're the man. Appreciate it, Joshua. Well, folks, that was a good time. Joshua Masters coming our way. Oh, look. High atop the Eagle's Nest broadcast studio, you are seeing from one of the many cameras that orbit our studios. And, that was good. But it's not over, because at the bottom of the hour, Michelle Medlock Adams is coming our way, and she's always got something to talk about. And you know what? Anyway, it's going to be good. So I gotta kind of get things ready. Everything's ready, almost. Before I leave, before Michelle comes on in just a few minutes, I would like to challenge you by asking you to ask yourself 2 questions. They've really helped me. First, what is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? And the second question is, how long ago was it? When we say work as unto the Lord, sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that takes courage. So I hope as you contemplate those 2 questions, you'll never be satisfied with either answer.